Medieval India, the Delhi Sultanate, page number 69, Decline and Disintegration of Delhi Sultanate, Firoz and his successors. During the latter half of Muhammad Tughlaq's reign, there were repeated rebellions in different parts of the empire. Rebellions by ambitious nobles, particularly in outlying areas, were now not a new feature. In most cases, the sultans had been able to suppress them with the help of the central army and a band of loyal nobles. Muhammad Tughlaq's difficulties were several. The rebellious the rebellions took place one after another in different parts of the empire. In Bengal, in Malabar, Tamil Nadu, in Warangal, in Kampali, Karnataka, and in West Bengal, in Awadh, and in Gujarat, and in Sindh. Muhammad Tughlaq did not trust anyone, at least not sufficiently. So he dashed from one part of the country to another to suppress the rebellions and wore out his armies. The rebellions in South India were the most serious. At first, rebellions in these areas were organized by local governors. The Sultan hurried to South India. After some time, plague broke out in the army. We are told that 2/3 of the army perished in this plague. This was a blow from which Muhammad Tughlaq could never recover. Soon after the return of Sultan from South India, there was another rebellion there, led by two brothers, Harihar and Bukka. They set up a principality which gradually expanded, and this was the Vijayanagara Empire, which soon embraced the entire south. Further north, in the Deccan, some foreign nobles set up a principality near Daulatabad, which expanded into the Mahabani Empire. We shall trace the achievements of these two remarkable empires in the subsequent chapter. Bengal also became independent. With a great effort, Muhammad Tughlaq was able to quell the rebellions in the Awadh, Gujarat and Sindh. While still in Sindh, Muhammad Tughlaq died and was succeeded by his cousin Firoz Tughlaq. Muhammad Tughlaq's policies had created a deep discontent among the nobles as well as in the army. He had also come to clash with Muslim theologians and Sufi saints who were very influential. But the unpopularity of Muhammad Tughlaq should not be exaggerated. Even when he was away from the capital for long periods, the administration in Delhi, the Punjab and other parts of the empire in North India continued to function normally. After his accession, Firoz Tughlaq was faced with the problem of preventing the imminent breakup of Delhi Sultanate. He adopted a policy of trying to appease the nobles, the army, the theologians, and of asserting his authority over only such areas which he could easily administer from the center. He therefore made no attempt to reassert his authority over South India and the Deccan. He led two campaigns into Bengal but was unsuccessful in both. Bengal was thus lost to the Sultanate. Even then, the Sultanate continued to be as large as it was during the early years of the reign of Alauddin Khilji. Firoz led a campaign against the ruler of Jajnagar, Odisha. He desecrated the temples there and gathered a rich plunder. But he made no attempt to annex Odisha. He also led a campaign against the Kangra in Punjab hills. His longest campaigns to deal with rebellions in Gujarat and Thata. Although the rebellions were crushed, the army suffered great hardship due to losing its way in Run of Kutch. Thus, Firoz by no means is a distinguished military leader, but his reign was the period of peace and quiet development. He decreed that whenever a noble died, his son should be allowed to succeed to his position, including his Ikta, and if he had no son, his son-in-law, and his absence, his slave. Firoz abolished the practice of torturing nobles and their officials if any balance was found against them at the time of auditing the accounts of their ikta. These steps pleased the nobles and was a major factor for the absence of rebellions by the nobles. With minor exception of one in Gujarat and Thatta, however, in the long run, the policy of making offices and ikta hereditary was bound to be harmful. It reduced the chances of competent men being recruited into the service outside a narrow circle and made the Sultan dependent on narrow oligarchy. Firoz extended the principle of heredity to army as well. Old soldiers were allowed to rest in peace and to send in their place their sons or son-in-law, and if they were not available, their slaves. The soldiers were not to be paid in cash but by assignments on the land revenue of villages. This meant that a soldier either had to go to villages to collect his salary or and absent himself from service, or to give the assignment to some middleman who would give him half or one third of its value. Thus, a soldier did not benefit in the long run. The entire military administration became lax. The soldiers were allowed to pass useless horses at the muster by bribing the clerks. It is a mistaken view of generosity. The Sultan himself once gave money to a soldier to bribe the clerk of the muster. Firoz tried to win over the theologians by proclaiming that he was a true Muslim king and that the state under him was truly Islamic state. Actually, right from the time of Iltutmish's accession to throne, there was a tussle between orthodox theologians and sultans regarding nature of the state and the policy to be adopted by the state towards the non-Muslims. As has been stated earlier, from the time of Iltutmish, especially under Alauddin and Muhammad Tughlaq, the Turkish rulers did not allow the theologians to dictate the policy of the state. They waged jihad against the Hindu rulers whenever it was convenient for them to do so. In order to keep the theologians satisfied, a number of them were appointed at high offices. The judiciary and the educational system, of course, remained in the hands of theologians. Despite outer trappings and appearances, Firoz followed the policy of his predecessors in essentials. There is no reason to believe that he allowed the theologians to dictate the state policy, but he gave a number of important concessions to the theologians. He tried to ban practices which the orthodox theologians considered un-Islamic. Thus, he prohibited the practice of Muslim women going out to worship at the graves of saints. He persecuted a number of Muslim sects which were considered heretical by the theologians. It was during the time of Firoz that jizya became a separate tax. Earlier, it was a part of land revenue. Firoz refused to exempt the Brahmins from the payment of jizya since this was not provided for in the Sharia. Only women, children, the disabled, and the indigent who had no means of livelihood were exempt from it. Worse, he publicly burnt a Brahmin for preaching to the Muslims on the ground that it was against the Sharia. On the same ground, he even ordered that the beautiful wall paintings in his palace be erased. These narrow views of Firoz Tughlaq were certainly harmful. At the time, Firoz Tughlaq was the first ruler who took steps to have Hindu religious works translated from Sanskrit into Persian, so that there may be better understanding of Hindu ideas and practices. Many books on music, medicine, mathematics were also translated from Sanskrit into Persian during his reign. Firoz also took a number of humanitarian measures. He banned inhuman punishment such as cutting off hands, feet, nose, etc. for theft and other offences. He set up hospitals for free treatment of the poor and ordered the kotwals to make list of unemployed persons and provided dowries for the daughters of the poor. However, it is likely that these measures were basically designed to help Muslims of good families who had fallen into bad times. This again shows the limited nature of state in India during the medieval times. However, Firoz did emphasize that the state was not meant merely for awarding punishments and collecting taxes, but it was a benevolent institution as well. In the context of the medieval times, the assertion of this principle of benevolence was a valuable one, and Firoz deserves credit for it. Firoz was keenly interested in the economic improvement of the country. He set up a large department of public works which looked after his building program. Firoz repaired and dug a number of canals. The longest canal was about 200 kilometers, which took off from the river Satluj to Hansi. Another canal took off from the Jamna. These and other canals were meant for irrigation purposes and also for providing water to some of the new towns which Firoz built. These towns, Firoza or Hisar in modern Haryana and Firozabad in modern Uttar Pradesh even exist today. Another step which Firoz took was both economic and political in nature. He ordered his officials that whenever they attacked a place, they should select handsome and well born young boys and send them to the Sultan as slaves. In this way, Firoz gradually gathered about 1,80,000 slaves. Some of these he trained for carrying on various handicrafts and posted them in the royal workshops, the karkhanas all over the empire. From others, he formed corps of soldiers who would be directly dependent on Sultan and hence he hoped would be completely loyal to him. The policy was not a new one. As we have seen earlier, Turkish sultans in India had loathed the practice of recruiting slaves. But experience has shown that these slaves could not be dependent on their loyalty for the descendants of their masters, and that they soon formed a separate interest group apart from the nobility. When Firoz died in 1388, the administrative and the political problems which had been faced after the death of every sultan came to the surface. The struggle for power between the sultan and the nobles started once again. The local zamindars and rajas took advantage of the situation to assume years of independence. The new factor in the situation was the active intervention of Firozi slaves and their attempt to put their own nominee on the throne. Sultan Muhammad, son of Firoz, was able to stabilize his position with their help. But one of his first steps were to break up the power of the slaves, killing and imprisoning many of them and scattering the rest. However, neither he nor his successor Nasiruddin Muhammad, who ruled from 1394 to 1412, could control the ambitious nobles and the intransigent rajas. Perhaps the major reason for this were the reforms of Firoz, which had made the nobility too strong and the army inefficient. The governors of provinces became independent, and the Sultan of Delhi was confined virtually to small area surrounding Delhi. As a wit said, the dominion of the Lord of Universe, being the title of Sultans of Delhi, extends from Delhi to Palam. The weakness of the Delhi Sultanate was made even worse by Taimur's invasions of Delhi in 1398. Taimur, who was a Turk but could claim a blood relationship with Changiz, has started his career of conquest in 1370 and gradually brought under his rule an entire tract from Syria to Transoxania and from southern Russia to Indus. The raid into India was a plundering raid, and its motive was to seize the wealth accumulated by the sultans of Delhi over the last 200 years. With the collapse of Delhi Sultanate, There was no one to meet this incursion. Temur's army mercilessly sacked and plundered the various towns on the way to Delhi. Temur then entered Delhi and sacked it without mercy. Large number of people, both Hindu and Muslims, as well as women and children, losing their lives. Temur's invasion once again showed the dangers of weak government in India. It resulted in the drain of large amount of wealth, gold, silver, jewelry, etc. from India. Temur also took with him a large number of Indian artisans such as masons, stone cutters, carpenters, etc. Some of them helped in putting up many fine buildings in his capital, Samarkand, but the direct political effect of Temur's invasions of India was small. The invasion of Temur may, however, be regarded as marking the end of the phase of a strong rule by Delhi sultans, although the Tughlaq dynasty itself lingered on till 1412. The responsibility of disintegration of Delhi Sultanate cannot be ascribed to any one ruler. We have seen that there were some persistent problems during the medieval times, such as the relations between the monarch and the nobles, the conflict with local rulers and zamindars, the pull of regional and geographical factors, etc. Individual rulers tried to cope with these problems, but none of them were in a position to effect fundamental changes in society to offset these perennial factors. Disintegration of the political fabric was thus just beneath the surface, and any weakness in the central administration set off a chain of events leading to political disintegration. Firoz was able to contain the chain of reactions which had set in due to the overextension of the empire under Ghiyasuddin and Muhammad Tughlaq. He instituted a series of reforms aimed at appeasing the nobles and soldiers, which, however, weakened the central machinery of administration, as we have seen. The period from 1200 to 1400 saw many new features in Indian life, viz., the system of government, the life and the condition of people, and the state of the art and architecture. These will be the subject of another chapter. Thank you everyone for tuning in. By this, we have completed the Delhi Sultanate part 2, that is chapter number 7 till page number 73. In the next part, we will start with the government and economic and social life under Delhi Sultanate, that is chapter number 8 in medieval India by Satish Chandra. Thank you everyone for tuning in. All the best for exams, and do share and subscribe the channel for more videos like this. Keep supporting us by liking and subscribing to our channel. Thank you everyone.